Hello everyone, this is the Mind of Lilith, and thank you for joining me today for an astrological interpretation of Kroy Biermann and Kim Zolciak's relationship. As you guys know, Kroy and Kim are going through a divorce, and Kroy recently revealed that Kim has pretty much financially bankrupted the entire family with her gambling and spending addiction. He's also requested that she go through a psychiatric evaluation for personality disorder because her gambling has destroyed their family. In fact, Kroy states that Kim has gambled away the college funds for their 4 minor children. A few weeks prior to them filing for divorce, we found out that they owe the IRS over $1 million in back taxes, and their home was about to be foreclosed. So this divorce announcement is not really surprising, especially if you have been following this couple from the very beginning. We were first introduced to Kim and Kroy on the Real Housewives of Atlanta reality show. I didn't really watch the show that much, but I remember when she first met Kroy as a single mother of 2 children, and she was financially dependent on her sugar daddy named Big Papa and her income from the show. I also remember Kroy's parents not liking Kim, and they warned him about her because Kroy, was a younger man with a $20 million NFL contract. He had no children, he had never been married, and he was in his early 20s when he met Kim. But their relationship progressed really quickly, courtesy of their Uranus and Mars aspects. And I can remember Kim being infatuated with Kroy's body and his overall appearance, which I'm sure boosted Kroy's Moon and Leo ego. They eventually got married and had 4 stair-step children. But since the beginning of their relationship, we saw infatuation, addiction, gambling, a huge age difference, not huge, but maybe 6 or 7 years, and now bankruptcy and divorce. The writing has been on the wall for this relationship since 2010 when Kim first met Kroy. So people have always asked, why was Kroy so enamored with Kim in the first place? And why is he leaving her now? Is Kim really a narcissist? And to answer some of these questions, I'm going to focus on the Neptune and Saturn aspects in their individual and synastry charts. But let's start with a quick overview of Kroy and Kim's natal charts. So according to Wikipedia.com, Kroy Biermann was born on September 12, 1985 in Hardin, Montana, and Kim Zolciak was born on May 19, 1978 in Pensacola, Florida. I don't have their times of birth, so I'm going to focus on how their planets are communicating with each other. Kroy's sun is at 19 degrees and 54 minutes of Virgo, trine Kim's sun at 28 degrees and 21 minutes of Taurus. So her birthday just passed on a new moon last Friday. Kim needs to be careful because her sun is between the fixed star Algol and the Pleiades, which can be dangerous. Uranus is also moving towards her sun to form a conjunction, which can cause unexpected challenges and even danger, especially while Mars is in Leo through July 2023. To be honest, I think that Kim and Kroy should stay away from each other as much as possible during this divorce because there's too much volatility in their charts, and there's also the notorious Saturn square Mars aspect between them, as well as a Venus square Mars aspect, which can elicit domestic violence. To make matters more complex, Kroy's natal Uranus is also 7 houses away from Kim's sun, and his Mars is square her sun. So this relationship can have an explosive ending, just like it had an explosive beginning. Kroy's moon is at 22 degrees and 26 minutes of Leo, square his Saturn and Scorpio at 23 degrees and 20 minutes. People with moon square Saturn have a high tolerance for abuse and emotional neglect because they tend to disconnect from or dismiss their own feelings. Of course, this is learned behavior from childhood because the moon represents the home, the family, the mother, the culture, etc. Moon square Saturn aspects can indicate an emotional, mental, or physical separation between the parents that makes the child feel lonely, unloved, and like a burden for the parents. The child's wants and needs are frequently denied or ignored, or the child may have felt like they had to earn their parents' love. This is probably one of the reasons why Kroy chose to distance himself from his own family for Kim. And, I think he did this because Kim massaged his moon. she gave him lots of praise and attention, and that is what he needed. Moon and Leo individuals need lots of praise and attention, and Kroy may have only received this conditionally, like when he was playing sports. So when Kim came along, she constantly complimented him and she admired Kroy, which is something that he really, really needed. Like, he was thirsty for that. So initially, he felt loved, safe, and protected with Kim. However, Kim's sun is square Kroy's moon. So Kim's ego desires were in conflict with what made Kroy feel secure. And because Saturn is a part of this configuration, this emotional separation between them happened slowly over time. Some would call Kim's excessive praise and infatuation with Kroy love bombing, which is how narcissists initially start the cycle of abuse. Kim's Mars in Leo is conjunct Kroy's moon in Leo, and with this aspect, there may have been emotional abuse or bullying, as Mars is an enemy to the moon. Moon conjunct Mars can also cause people to use sex to bond emotionally. Because Kim is Mars in a situation, she used her sexual prowess to make Kroy feel like she loved him, but she has Saturn and Uranus conjunct his moon as well. So eventually, she made him feel the way his parents did, like he had to earn her love, like he wasn't good enough. Saturn conjunct moon relationships can be binding, committed, and even stable, but also very painful because over time, because Saturn rules time, over time, love and affection is replaced with responsibility, guilt, aloofness, and obligation. In other words, Kim ended up treating Kroy the way his parents did, and that's why it's always important to heal your trauma before you enter any relationship, because we tend to attract people who vibrate on our same frequency. Kim and Kroy's shadows are compatible. Neither of them loved themselves, so they did not have the proper tools to love each other, and they used sex, drugs, and other addictions to manage their emotional issues. They confused the dopamine rush of sex and getting high and fame and spending money with love and happiness. And because all of these things are fleeting, here we are getting a divorce 10 years later. Kim has the sun in Taurus in conjunct moon in Libra. Both her sun and moon are ruled by Venus. Kim's Venus, which rules her sun and her moon, is in the sign of Gemini. Kim's natal Venus is being opposed by Neptune, so this planet has a significant influence on her sun and her moon as well. When there's a sun-moon in conjunction, a person rarely ever feels satisfied or they feel imbalanced, and it's like pouring water into a cup with a hole in it. The inconjunction means that the planets don't speak the same language or they're not communicating with each other. And so for Kim, this means that her wants were totally different from her emotional needs. And because these planets were both ruled by Venus, the inconjunction is expressed in Venusian ways, through money, sex, and relationships. The mind and the heart are disconnected here. Usually, a Taurus sun wants stability, consistency, practicality, security, and resources, all of which are cultivated consistently over time. A Libra moon is not stable. It vacillates, it's indecisive, it's cardinal, it's contradictory, and it's even emotionally detached, with an inability to commit to one thing for long enough for it to stick. People with the sun in conjunct moon or moon in conjunct Mercury can have ADHD or mental or emotional instability. I believe Kim already had 2 children by 2 different men when she met Kroy, and then she had 4 more for Kroy, with no true desire to really raise and nurture her children properly. In my opinion, I think she had the children because she enjoyed having sex with Kroy, and we can see this with a Neptune-Mars opposition, which can make you addicted to a person's sex as well. So Venus in Gemini, or Venus in the 3rd house, which Kim has, Venus in Gemini, is a quick spender. This is somebody who spends money without thinking. She spends money to feel secure. And this is a way for her to communicate that she's not feeling satisfied with something. In other words, Kim uses retail therapy to manage her anxiety and insecurities. Gemini is ruled by Mercury, which represents theft, fast movement, calculations, mathematics, measurements, thinking, dexterity, skills, and the hands in general. And to make matters worse, Kim has Jupiter conjunct Venus. She has an exalted Jupiter in Cancer conjunct Venus. So she's a magnet for money. But because Neptune is in opposition to her Venus, and this is part of the inconjunction between the sun and the moon, she doesn't appreciate the true value of money. She's good at making money, but very bad at managing it because she doesn't know how to manage her emotions. On one episode of Housewives, I do remember Kim getting like a cool sculpting or some sort of lipo procedure on her stomach while she was eating a slice of pizza, which showed how little she respected money. There were also episodes where she would spend thousands of dollars on scratch-off tickets and at casinos, and she didn't care about losing the money. She rarely ever won big like that, right? Kim also has Mars conjunct Saturn and Mars square Saturn. She has a nasty temper. She's very controlling and she's abusive. It is hard for her to back down from a fight or to admit defeat or wrongdoing. She doesn't believe in equal partnerships or fairness. She wants what she wants and will do almost anything, including bullying someone, to get it because the objective is winning and domination. She has little to no concern for other people's feelings. She just wants to win, basically. Kim may use sex or violence to force her partner to commit to her, and she's unrelenting, uncompromising, impatient, egotistical, and demands total obedience. Kim only submits when she wants to, but there's usually a hidden motive involved, or a trap, or bait, because she's using Saturn to play the long game. But is she a narcissist? So, okay, in a nutshell, narcissism is like the inability to form genuine emotional connections with other people due to pathological insecurity, separation anxiety, anger, and shame. Narcissists usually have transactional or superficial relationships for attention, adoration, praise, money, or sex. The narcissist is only concerned about getting what they want and has no problem using deception, manipulation, abuse, or even violence to get it. And once they get it, they pretty much discard or get rid of the person who they used like an old broken toy. And they have no conscience, no guilt, and no shame about what they've done. As a matter of fact, they usually feel good about betraying someone or using someone who trusted them because when they were little, more than likely, they were constantly betrayed by the people who they trusted. Most narcissists have sadistic tendencies and they get pleasure from other people's pain. So how is Neptune involved? Neptune can make someone lose connection with reality in pursuit of a belief, a feeling, an experience, or a goal. And we see this quite often in drug addicts who are willing to destroy themselves and their families for a quick high. When I look for narcissism in a natal chart, I look for discordant aspects between Neptune, Saturn, and or Pluto and the Sun, Ascendant, or Venus. Neptunian narcissism is not expressed the same way as Saturnian or Plutonian narcissism. Neptunian narcissists dissolve the boundaries and the identities of their victims using deception, instability, illusion, and projection. Saturnian narcissists use devaluation, oppression, and deprivation to abuse their victims. Plutonian narcissists use violence, fear, psychological warfare, and resource transference to abuse their victims. All types of narcissists partake in daily routines and rituals that condition their victims to do whatever it takes to keep them happy, like big babies. Okay? Neptunian rituals can involve drugs and alcohol and other addictions that disintegrate the individuality of their partner and guilt them into meeting their needs at the expense of their own self-preservation. Saturnian rituals usually involve some sort of emotional withdrawal or physical or mental imprisonment. Plutonian rituals can involve violence, brainwashing, and sexual abuse. All forms of narcissistic abuse is used to cultivate codependency to assuage the narcissist's separation anxiety and hidden anger about their childhood traumas. Kim's highly addictive and selfish personality is definitely narcissistic, and although I'm not a therapist or a psychologist, I would not be surprised if she has NPD or bipolar disorder or BPD, all of which Kroy is asking Kim to be evaluated for. Now, all addicts are not narcissistic, but all narcissists have addictive personalities. The addiction can be food, sex, attention, drinking, gambling, drugs, whatever they need to regulate their anxiety, depression, shame, and boredom. So to address the question of why Kim and Kroy were attracted to each other in the first place, let me start with Neptune. Neptune is the planet of mystery, confusion, self-destruction, addiction, deception, elusiveness, narcissism, fantasy, idealism, unconditional love, and martyrdom, even suicide and altruism. Neptune represents the ideals and beliefs that we're willing to kill and die for. Okay? We're all familiar with the Jesus Christ myth that was propagated during the age of Pisces. As the higher octave of Venus, because Venus is exalted in Pisces, Neptune uses Venusian principles or characteristics or qualities or experiences to teach us lessons. And what does Venus represent? Venus represents pleasure, sex, food, luxury, the finer things in life, communication, harmony, beauty, balance, ritual, self-esteem, money, femininity, etc. Neptune uses our Venus to teach us lessons about self-love, boundaries, and discipline, all of which are Saturnian significations. Saturn is exalted in Libra, which again is ruled by Venus. In my personal opinion, Neptune is perhaps the most painful and the most difficult planet to manage because it uses our hopes and our dreams and our fantasies to teach us soul purging lessons about boundaries and self-preservation. Neptune will make you sacrifice yourself for someone who doesn't give a damn about you, to force you to learn that you should never sacrifice yourself for anyone. Neptune can make somebody justify murder, theft, deception, or anything negative to protect their belief systems or ideologies. Neptune will influence someone to get high on drugs and alcohol for years. You know, you lose your teeth, you lose your money, you lose your family, you lose your good looks and your health. And this will force you to deal with whatever pain you're using the drugs and the alcohol to run away from. And if you don't, more than likely you'll die of overdose and disease. Okay? And Neptune will also have you fall in love with a pedophile or a murderer, and you won't wake up until you're in jail because you've made yourself an accomplice to prove your unconditional love to this evil person. I'm going to discuss this further in my soul tie commentary later this week. In 2010, when Kim met Kroy, Neptune was in its final degrees of Aquarius, forming a square with Kim's Sun and opposing Kroy's Mars. Kim's natal Neptune in Sagittarius is also square Kroy's Sun, Mercury, and Uranus. In the past, I've discussed the role of Neptune in karmic relationships, and I used Arion and Martel as an example. Arion has Neptune in her 5th house, where Martel's Sun is, so she sees him as her ideal man, regardless of how poorly he treats her. I consider a relationship Neptunian if Neptune forms an aspect of a square, conjunction, or opposition to the ascendant Sun, Mercury, or Venus for both parties. So Kim's planet of Neptune, which is confusion and weakness and dissipation and optimism, was square Kroy's planets of communication, thinking, ego identity, our perspectives on things, and the things that we want, right? Her energy made him lose his bearings. She became like a siren or a drug to him. Well, they were like a drug to each other, to be honest. And this is further evidenced by the Neptune opposing Mars aspect, which can represent a BDSM relationship, or a relationship where one person subconsciously enjoys the abuse that their partner inflicts on them, or vice versa. One person enjoys inflicting abuse on the other person because they feel like they deserve it, or they feel like their partner deserves it. This abuse can be emotional, mental, sexual, financial, verbal, or whatever. Blueface and Christian Rock have this aspect as well. Martel and Arion also have this aspect. Martel has Mars in Libra, and Arion has Neptune in Capricorn. And we can see how addicted, Arion is to Martel, regardless of how much he abuses her. She's okay with it because she feels like she deserves it on a deeper subconscious level. It is not a coincidence that as soon as Kroy met Kim, he pretty much threw away his NFL career to become a house husband and her personal servant slave. Neptune square, opposite, or conjunct Mars can cause emasculation, subjugation, and dissipation of the more virulent energies of Mars. Mars is warfare, conflict, masculinity, anger, violence, and with Neptune here, this energy is either turned inward, is misdirected, or it's transmuted into something that benefits the Neptunian person, okay? A lot of men kept saying that Kim clipped Kroy's balls. That's Neptune square Mars. And since Kim is a Neptune in the situation, she was the one who had the power to use her sexuality to disarm and weaken Kroy, especially since he saw her as the perfect woman for him, not just because they had great sex, but because Kim's Neptune pretty much it made it difficult for Kroy to see things clearly. It made him confused. It blinded him in a sense. okay? As I mentioned earlier, Kim has Jupiter conjunct Venus. Jupiter represents expansion, growth, abundance, and opportunity. And she has an exalted Jupiter conjunct Venus. So again, she can attract resources and opportunities very easily. But Jupiter, like Neptune, is a gift and a curse, because uncontrolled growth can become cancerous. Having access to everything you want can be just as destructive as having not enough or not having enough. We all saw what happened to Whitney Houston. We all saw what happened to DMX and other celebrities who had limitless amounts of money to spend on their vices, which ultimately shortened their lifespans. For Kim, money is as cheap as the spoken word. There is no weight or heft or energy behind it. Its value is fleeting and superficial, like the energy of Gemini. In fact, for her, money is only valuable when it's being spent. It has no storage or long-term value for her. If you think about it, right? Words that aren't spoken have no value unless they're being applied or shared through some form of communication. If you don't communicate with people, more than likely you won't have any relationship with them. So essentially, Kim treats her money like people treat language, loosely, rapidly, without any discipline or restriction. There's a laissez-faire or free attitude towards money. And this is also something that she feels towards her love interests. She has a laissez-faire or transactional attitude towards her relationship partners. She doesn't see her love interests clearly. With the Neptune opposition, they're only there to serve her. They only exist as objects to help her live out her fantasies. They don't really have any other value outside of that. Nick Cannon has a similar aspect, and I'll discuss him later on next week. So yeah, Kim treats her money like people treat language and words and communication. It's loose, it's rapid, without any discipline or restriction, hence the gambling. Like, I gotta spend the money as soon as I get it. Neptune and Jupiter are both planets of addiction and excess. And when they form a square or a conjunction or an opposition to Venus, which also rules Kim's sun and moon, we can see how she ended up wasting millions of dollars. Millions. Kim also has Jupiter square moon, which is someone who is emotionally self-indulgent, almost greedy, and self-centered, and only concerned with their own feelings. This is the eternal optimist who can always see the bright side of things, regardless of how dire the situation is, which is not a bad thing. That's a good thing, if you're not an addict. Because an addict with this aspect will always downplay the severity of their addiction. This is, again, someone who's emotionally indulgent. I do what I feel like doing, regardless of how it affects other people around me. Kim's moon is ruled by Venus, so the Jupiter square can elicit excessive spending, excessive sex, excessive drinking, and self-indulgent behavior. Kim was very spoiled. It was never enough when it comes to Jupiter and Neptune until Saturn comes around and lays down the law. I'm going to discuss Saturn in a little bit, but I think the cracks began to show in Kim's marriage to Kroy when Saturn entered Sagittarius in 2014, and those red flags were ignored. And then when Saturn entered Aquarius in 2020, it started to square Kim's sun. As a matter of fact, it's still squaring Kim's sun because Kim's sun is at 28 degrees of Taurus. So when Saturn entered Aquarius, I wouldn't be surprised if Kim and Kroy's relationship began to deteriorate precipitously. And now, Saturn's in Pisces, slowly moving to square Kim's Venus within the next year, which is when I think she'll hit rock bottom. A difficult Saturn transit will deprive you of all your luxuries, your freedom, your resources, and pretty much everything that you value, including your children. And we can see that Kroy has petitioned for full custody of their 4 children because he says that Kim is an unfit mother due to her various addictions and her personality disorder. On a side note, Kim has a Hades moon. And with this aspect, the relationship with the mother is complicated due to a betrayal or the child having to grow up too fast. I wouldn't be surprised if Kim was sexually abused as a child. I'm not saying she was, but in many cases, when women have a bad relationship, or when people have a bad relationship with themselves and with money, they were violated in some way. The violation could have been sexual, could have been physical, could have been emotional, could have been mental, many different things. Earlier, I talked about the transactional nature of Kim's spending habits. I wonder if she was ever a sex worker, which is definitely possible with Pluto trine Venus in Gemini, opposing Neptune. I know she was a sugar baby for Big Papa, but I think her issue may have been deeper than that. I think she could have either been violated by somebody sexually, or there was some shame about her financial situation as a kid, and so she felt betrayed with her parents for not being able to give her the resources or the money or the lifestyle that she wanted. I don't know. But with the Pluto conjunct Moon situation, Kim either has a problem with her mother, the way she was raised, her home environment, her culture, or something with dealing with the family. And her emotional issues is exacerbated by the Sun in conjunction, which is like her almost like blocking out the trauma that she experienced. This could also be her having mental health issues that will cause her to be self-destructive. I don't know what the source of these issues are. It could be genetic. I have no idea. I don't know where her house placements are because I don't have her ascendant. But something happened to her as a child, or she experienced things as a child that made her resent her family or her mother with Pluto conjunct the Moon. There's a complicated relationship with the mother and the child. She may have felt like she had to grow up too fast. She may have felt like she didn't have enough support and nurturing from her mother. I don't know what happened, but yeah. I don't know when Kim lost her virginity or when she started having sex, but she had her 2 daughters relatively young by 2 different men. So I don't know if she was sexually active at a young age and why that would be the case. Like, why would a young girl who's, I don't know how old she was when she first started having sex, but if I knew that, that would give me some sort of indication as to like why she would have an issue with her parents or her family or her mother in the first place. But I don't have that information. Okay, so although Kroy let Kim control the relationship, he submitted to her to the point where he allowed himself to drift away. Kroy has Chiron square Sun and Mercury. Chiron is the wounded healer. When Chiron gets involved, we experience pain and traumatic experiences. In fact, the only way to heal Chiron or to work with Chiron is to use the energy of Chiron to heal others of the same trauma that you've been through. And Kevin Samuels did this when he started his platform. Kroy would actually become really successful if he decided to start a platform discussing his childhood experiences and his difficult marriage to Kim, and using that as a way to help men and women deal with self-esteem issues that can lead to abusive relationships with people like Kim. So yeah, Kroy, has Chiron square Sun and Mercury. He feels insecure about speaking his mind and is easily manipulated because he's afraid of rejection and being ostracized and punished. So Kim was able to convince him to do things that he didn't really want to do. He's very susceptible to peer pressure. He has a very weak mind. Okay. So I'm not saying he's dumb, but when I first saw him, I was like, he's a little bit delayed. Something about him is a bit, not slow, but green, gullible, naive, innocent. He doesn't seem like a quick thinker. He seems like he's afraid to think for himself. If he went through experiences that made him afraid to think for himself, I think for the first time when he met Kim, he felt comfortable in speaking up for himself and making his own decisions, because initially Kim made him feel validated, loved, nurtured, valued, protected, safe. And he may not have felt that way about his parents growing up, right? I'm not saying his parents didn't love him, but for him to be able to disconnect from his family the way he did, the disconnect was already there. Kim did not make him separate from his family. There was already some sort of separation that she pretty much exacerbated when she came into his life. Okay, so why is this relationship ending now? In my opinion, I think that this relationship is ending now because Saturn has transited into Pisces on March 7th of this year. Saturn is about to form an opposition to Kroy's Sun, Mercury, and Mars. And for Kim, Saturn in Pisces is squaring her Venus, which rules her Sun and Moon. And again, Venus is about money, luxuries, things we value, beauty, everything. The Neptune party is over. Okay, the energies of Saturn and Neptune are completely different. Saturn rules discipline, time, responsibilities, death, old age, burdens, deprivation, imprisonment, the law, karmas, debts, slavery, debts, tragedy, abandoned land, and restrictions. When Saturn forms an opposition, square, or conjunction with any personal planet, the person has to be more responsible and more resourceful, and they're usually rewarded for their hard work, discipline, and sacrifices. Saturn makes us pay for all debts, and it forces us to deal with our mistakes. Kim has been spoiled by the protection of Jupiter, Neptune, and her Venus placements. She's earned millions of dollars without having any real skill, and she was irresponsible, wasteful, spoiled, and impractical. All of the things that Saturn hates. The Saturn transit through Pisces, Aries, Taurus, and Gemini, 7 years. Pisces, Aries, Taurus, and Gemini. The next 7 to 10 years, Saturn will teach Kim the value of a dollar. Okay? She will be deprived of the very things she wasted throughout her life to teach her this lesson. While Jupiter teaches us by giving us too much of what we want to the point where we become gluttonous and we destroy ourselves with our own greed and excess, Saturn teaches us through deprivation and loss. And the extent of the loss is directly proportional to the amount of waste and irresponsibility that we participated in. Croy has Saturn square Venus. People with Saturn square Venus tend to feel like they have to work for someone's love. For them, love is not free and comes with heavy responsibilities, which is why he didn't really flinch or run away from the idea of taking care of Kim's 2 children by 2 other men. As a young man with no kids, no debt, no nothing, he didn't mind the responsibility. Saturn square Venus people can also be attracted to older individuals, and the relationship can become codependent in some way because these people need to feel needed. They don't feel worthy of love without penalty or sacrifice. These people may try to prove their worth by giving their Venus away, right? This is money, comfort, and sex. I mentioned earlier that Saturn represents loss and deprivation. If I give away the things that I value, maybe you'll see my value, right? So now that Saturn has taken away everything from Croy, Croy has given everything away in a sense, hopefully, he's learned to integrate the energies of Saturn and Venus in a more balanced way. And this requires self-love. Saturn and Scorpio people, which is what Croy has, Saturn and Scorpio people tend to be emotionally or sexually frozen, which is why their partners can exploit them financially. A lot of Saturn and Scorpio people tend to confuse financial support with true intimacy and love. And then they attract partners who exploit them financially while cheating on them, right? Kim has Saturn in Leo. And Saturn and Leo people were deprived of attention, love, and affection from their parents. So they tend to use flattery and fakeness to garner the attention and affection from friends, lovers, and associates. Kim has Saturn square her sun, so she's a very insecure or self-conscious person, and she's self-conscious about her identity and her appearance because the sun represents your identity, your ego, your perspective on things, and your physical appearance. She feels like she'll never have enough of what she needs, or there's something or someone in the way of her reaching true fulfillment. She doesn't think she's good enough as she is, which is why she connects with Croy's Venus square Saturn. Remember, Kim is ruled by Venus. She has a Venus, Sun, and Moon. And Croy's Venus is square his Saturn. Croy and Kim's relationship was nothing but a trauma bond covered in a Burberry trench coat. And they used sex, gambling, and other addictions to escape the deep feeling of insecurity and emptiness in their relationship. Saturn square Saturn relationships are difficult to navigate because of generational differences, which can cause emotional separation over time. So I'm going to sum it up. I think that based on what I'm seeing in the charts, Kim was emotionally, financially, and maybe even physically abusive towards Croy. There was some element of violence in this relationship. I think she was the one who inflicted it on him, but I wouldn't be surprised if he reciprocated. But this relationship, in my opinion, did not end last week. It was over a couple of years ago. But when you have a Saturn square Mars relationship like Whitney and Bobby, you refuse to lose, right? Initially, in Saturn square Mars relationship, the friction comes from outside. Family members and friends and associates are like, why are you guys together? You don't belong together. And that actually strengthens the bond of the Saturn square Mars couple. Again, we saw this with Bobby Brown and Whitney Houston. But over time, After the external opposition dissipates, what happens is that these two malefic planets will destroy each other, usually. It is hard for these two people to let each other go because they had to fight really hard to be together and they want to win. But with Saturn square Mars, that energy is now turned inward towards their relationship. So initially they wanted to win against the world. It was me and you against the world, right? Nobody wanted us together. They didn't think we belonged together. We're going to prove them wrong. Okay. Once people stop giving a damn and the couple has time to be together, Saturn, after 7 years, shit starts to get real heavy. After 14 years, it gets almost unbearable. It's not always the case. There's some couples who have Saturn Mars square aspects who are doing fine. But speaking of Kroy and Kim, and Whitney and Bobby even, we can see that with the Saturn square Mars, one or both people refuses to back down from conflict. They both want to win. Okay. Saturn is the immovable force and Mars is the unstoppable object. Saturnian energy oppresses and dominates through deprivation, withdrawing love, withholding emotions, being cold and cruel and emotionally distant. Mars uses anger and violence and abuse to subjugate or oppress their partners, right? And so when you have these two planets in conflict with each other, violence is almost inevitable, especially since Kroy's Mars is square Kim's Sun anyway. So this relationship got really volatile and I'm happy they're getting a divorce. This is going to turn into a disaster if they stay together. It's really bad now, but you know, listen, I'm gonna say this and I could be wrong. I'm hoping I'm wrong. Kroy seems like the type of guy who could snap. Like someone who's really quiet, someone who takes abuse for a long time, and then one day they just can't take it no more and they fucking snap. I see him as being that kind of person. I'm hoping that I'm wrong. And that's why I said in the beginning, I hope that they stay away from each other because this is too toxic, it's too volatile, it's too abusive. The love that was never really there is gone. As a matter of fact, the only thing that kept them together was money and sex, both of which are gone now. So what's left but animosity, resentment, almost even hatred. Almost hatred with Saturn square Mars. Saturn square Mars can cause you to hate somebody because you're like, how the fuck did I end up with this person? Neptune square Sun. How did I end up with this person? What did I see in them in the first place? This lady spent all my fucking money. She ruined my life. Once Kroy wakes up from the Neptunian fog of Kim's sexy, seductive, addictive energy, he's going to be very angry. If he's not already. He's going to be very angry if he's not already. And because Kim has Saturn conjunct Mars, I can see her poking the bear 1 times too many. So I think they should stay separate. I think they should live in separate houses while they're going through this divorce. They should not be together until this has been resolved. Period. Okay? Alright guys, I'm gonna leave it there. If you want to order a personal astrology or tarot reading for me, you can go to my website. The link is in the description box. I look forward to reading your feedback. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for listening.